Good afternoon and welcome at IMPAKT TV, live from the IMPAKT Festival all the way up in the building we are sitting. My name is Rosa Wevers and I will be your host for this afternoon. And I'm very happy to introduce one of the keynote speakers of today, Linda Hilfling Ritasdatter. She's an artist and researcher joining us from Copenhagen, but now in person. She's a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Arts and Communication at Malmö University and an external lecturer at Linnaeus University in Sweden. Please welcome Linda.
Hello, hi.
With a wonderful book, I see.
Hey.
So, Linda, could you tell us a little bit about today? How was the first day at the festival? How was your performance lecture?
I hope it was all right. It was very amusing to do it. So I gave a talk about what I see as the curse of smooth operations. And that's basically the sort of entanglement of hidden labor, like the back ends of the infrastructures where there are hidden human labor who are upkeeping the flow so that the operation seems to be smooth and seamless. So I'd say that's what was my focus, and I was talking about it through an example of a very specific case study of a programming language called COBOL.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I briefly introduced you, but I would like to ask you, because your practice seems to span across research, arts, the combination of the two, and intervention in the different fields. You also do coding, or you can read programming language. Could you, in your own words, briefly introduce what you see as the focus of your work?
Yeah, so I'm interested in power structures and how they are sort of playing out as part of our technologies. So I've been particularly interested in that sense in code, but it can also be regulative frameworks or law, actually, even language in itself. And I work as an artist by sort of, maybe you could call it a granular material engagement with these topics by actually turning. So for instance, in this case, I'm turning to COBOL and learning to program in COBOL. I'm also doing work in COBOL. So that's part of it. And then, like, by zooming really in this closely, I think you find the wider perspectives in the details, right? So it's about power and territories of communication, but it's sort of unwrapped, literally, in the case of COBOL at least, by really going in and delving with the details and the construction. So not only, I would say, I think that's important to say, so it's not only the code in itself, but also the structures it's part of, but how it's played out, like in the details, so the economic structures or the cultural aspects, but looking inside of it and see how it's...
So by really intervening into how these systems work or how the coding language is working, you also are able to say something about the larger power structures in which they are embedded, but maybe that they also reproduce.
Yeah, exactly.
What I find really interesting about your keynote is how you also address the importance of looking at context. So not only what the systems do, but also how they are used or in which context they are developed. Could you say a little bit more on why that is important to you?
Yes, I would say that that's really an intersectional perspective or approach to code, and like to sort of see code and look how it's the intersection now, like, or intersecting domains of power is played out. Like, so it's not only first it's just code, it's a programming language, but then you open it up and you see it's really disliked in the West. So that's one part of it. But then you also noticed there are other places in the world where someone is forced to learn this language in order to have that job. And then it's not. So if I had started the other way around, if I had started first by saying, oh, this is programming language, and here you have to learn the language, but if you understand that it's also a different way, really disliked, the situation of that program learning it becomes something else. And here in the context of COBOL, it obviously becomes a sort of neo-colonial, actually, sort of manifestation within just the learning of COBOL, I think. And I think that's really key to my analysis and the way I engage with it, that I turn it around in all these different ways and really try to see it from different perspectives, not to sort of cover everything, but in order to open it from different sides to understand what it means and what it's actually doing in that way.
I want to ask a little bit more about that, but first, just for the audience, maybe there's people listening who forgot or are not quite sure if they understand what COBOL is. Could you briefly reiterate what it is?
So COBOL is a programming language, and it was developed in the end of the 50s. It sort of was launched in 1960. So it's one of the earliest third-generation programming languages, and that means that it's a language that you can actually move to another machine. So you write the code in a sort of pseudocode, and then you can move it to a different machine. So that's one aspect, like just to say this is the setting of it. And more specifically about the language, it has a very interesting syntax compared to other programming languages. It is very verbose, very sort of rigid, extremely long code, and its most outstanding feature is probably that it's appearing like human language. And this was the intention from the people who created it, that they wanted to make a sort of human-like or very people-oriented, I would say, people-oriented language that was easily accessible, that you could read and write and understand it easily. So this is somehow the feature of it, but that also made it not look really like it doesn't resemble the sort of simplicity and beauty of logical simplicity that computer scientists are usually thinking with programming languages. It's more like it's really what made it probably the most disliked programming language ever. So it has been extremely unpopular, but also very widely used. And it's COBOL is short for Common Business-Oriented Language. So it's used to these rather dull tasks of making payrolls, organizing retail, ticket reservation systems, moving people, goods, money transactions, of course. So it's not a language that is doing fancy number crunching, like cool programming language, but it's really a sort of more reproductive functions that it's doing. It's sort of all the programs written in COBOL is sort of, they have a reproductive nature that's sort of just keeping the wheels of the machinery turning.
And I guess that takes us to what you explained, what happens at the back end, right, of these technologies.
Yeah.
I found it really striking how you explained how, in order for all these systems to function smoothly, or at least appear as if they are functioning smoothly, there's a lot of people, especially based in the global south, who are doing a lot of work to repair, to maintain, to make sure that these hiccups don't work. Can you explain a little bit more about that, and also how you see that as a form of colonialism as well?
And enhancement, I would say also. So I think the programming book, so sorry. No, I think the programming book that I showed in my lecture, and this is sort of, like this cover is a sort of reappropriation of, I would say. I think that is a really good example.
Maybe you can show it a little bit closer to the camera.
So this is not the right, like, I reappropriate this cover, but underneath you can see that it's called Structured COBOL Programming, 8th edition, the Stern and Stern book. And this is the textbook that I got when I had my first private lesson in Bangalore in COBOL. And what is so striking about it is that if you turn to it and zoom in on the picture here, we'll see that it says restricted for sale only in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. And I turn it and it says this book is for sale only in the country to which it's first consigned, but it may not be re-exported, and it's part of a continuing program of paper-bound textbooks, especially designed for students in developing countries at a reduced price. I think that this is a very interesting example of this, to go back to what we talked about before, about these intersecting sort of domains of power, because learning COBOL in the global north and global south is not obviously not the same. Today there's a lot of active code, but it's not, you don't learn it to make new applications. It's not to make you would never make a new system in COBOL, but you only learn it so you can sort of support and keep up the existing services or the existing system. So it's not it's really this sort of maintenance, or to put it quite boldly, like the janitors of information architectures, and then understanding that this is foremost not this is not taking place in the global north, but actually displaced and being this hidden, I think really is this is a brilliant example of a kind of neo-colonial approach, that in order for us to keep up the smooth operations, we need to have someone sitting and maintaining the systems in a very disliked programming language. But I also say that now we talk about COBOL a lot, but it's actually just an example, because it doesn't need to specifically talk about like all information's architectures and systems. They need upkeeping, and they need.
And I think it also very much reminds me of Tabitha Rezer, an artist who has made a lot of work in which he uses the notion of electronic colonialism. And I think, it very much relates to what you're saying also, to understand how, on the one hand, you have, for example, Silicon Valley, where a lot of money is being made. A lot of power is also reproduced in the control that these new platforms, for example, have about how we shop, how we have access to the news, how we communicate with each other. And that a certain Western or hegemony is being upkept through that. And at the same time, this also entails the extraction of resources, of labor, of land, natural resources in the global south. So I think there's a lot of connections to that.
No, absolutely, yeah.
So maybe turning back a little bit to, so you've done a lot of research work, you're also an artist. When I was looking into your work, I also found an exhibition that you had, a solo exhibition in 2018 called Now We Have Proof in Capitals. The exhibition was an investigation of the tendency to take the algorithm, data and their validity for granted. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that project, and also how, because if I know it correctly, you also used or made algorithms or used algorithms for that initial?
Yeah, so actually what I've been doing, and even before that, so this was I believe, second or third iteration of the project in a way. So yeah, let's see, maybe I can find the letter here. So as part of my research, I found a very interesting letter written to the editor of End Time, which is this sort of conservative Christian magazine. And in the letter, the writer had, it was written in spring 1999, and the person who had sort of noticed that if one takes the letters of the word computer and put them together, like you assign like A is 6, B equals 12, and so on to Z equal, I think, 156. Then you apply that numerological system to the word computer, then you will discover that it makes up 666. And this was a letter. It was not written as a code or anything. It was a letter written in this sort of panicking age of like really paranoid for the upcoming millennium transition, but written to End Time and suggesting that, so we have believed that the computer chip would be the work of Lucifer, but now we have proof. I find that utterly interesting, this sort of using numbers and systems in order to prove something. I took this numerological system, which it basically is, and I wrote it in COBOL, which is like, so I translated it into a code in COBOL, and that is, so I should perhaps also just say, like, if you haven't seen the lecture before, that COBOL played a major role in the Y2K pop, so it's sort of very connected to this. So, but I wrote it in COBOL, and then I just made it run, reading stuff, looking, searching, and to see other words being 666. And it was really interesting and very funny. So humanity, surprisingly, also is 660. So we have speculated that humanity may be the, and so forth. So humanity, Santa Claus, New York. I mean, I have done this for many years, and the exhibition you mentioned is one out of several iterations of that. So I had...
So, because the title was Now We Have Proof.
Yes,
so
exactly.
If I understand it correctly, there's proof that humanity and New York are also...
I took for each new word I found, I let the script generate a new letter, and this was faxed to End Time. So it was like, so they got a new letter to the editor. It says basically, dear editor, and then exactly the same wording as the initial writer had, and then with the new work. And so we have speculated that blah, blah, blah will be the mark. Now we have proof. And I have done this as a project with a very small, call them experimental publishing project in Gothenburg in Sweden, where every time I have generated, or the script has generated 666 new letters, they will actually compile it into a book, and they are publishing these books, and it's called Endless End Time, a complete index of all elements leading to the end of the world. And we started in 2016. 2018 was, I believe, the second book, and it's an endless project, so we'll do this forever. We have made a contract, and we will continue doing this. And I can just, maybe I can show you, because now I have the, no, I'm turning it the wrong side. Let's see, but I have some images in this book here where you can see, like, this is how they look, these books. So Ole is, that I work with in this project, he's always hand-binding the books. So we are really, like, it's become very, very physical, and it's hand-bound, and it takes a very long time. It's really speeding down, I would say, slowing down, of course, this process to fit humans and not the speed of the computer.
So it sounds also like the project is saying something about the absurdity, right?
Absolutely.
Of our belief in these systems as having all the answers.
Yes. Yeah.
A question of a bit of a different order. We were just talking before a little bit, and you told me that this is not by far at all the first time you're in the Netherlands, because you actually studied at the Piet Zwart Institute.
Yes.
Is that correct? Could you tell me a little bit more on how that time in the Netherlands at Piet Zwart has also influenced the work that you're doing?
It has influenced a lot. So I was doing my master's in networked media design, I believe it was called, many years ago. It was from 2006 to 2008. And what is really unique about it, it has changed a bit, I would say, Piet Zwart, and this particular program has changed. But what was really unique was really that we came, all the different students had quite a varied background, but we were really taught to program, and so we were not taught to work within confined software, but really to build our own and to sort of interrogate code and software and systems and to pull them apart in order to build our own, but also just to understand them. And I think that this entire research that I've done, I mean, it probably wouldn't have been without these 2 years, Piet Zwart, because this was sort of laying the initial foundation for a sort of very certain way to engage with code, both like really with code, but also to thinking and reflecting on the implications of code. Right?
And what would be your advice to maybe people who are listening who would also like to move into this particular way of doing research or doing
to
art?
Piet Zwart. Yes, no.
Okay, so go to Piet Zwart, that's the first, and what would be the second?
No, I think, that's tricky, because I don't know. I mean...
or maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier?
Yeah, but things are changing also, so I wonder, no, I think it took me many years before I found something like Piet Zwart, actually, because it didn't exist. I'm Danish, and there was nothing like that in Denmark. So I think it was very unique, actually, that this sort of, see art academies where you're not really engaged in code and in the really digging into the technologies. Unfortunately, I think curiosity to do that, and also braveness, and
and probably also finding a context in which you can learn from others and be inspired.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. On that note, I think we're gonna end this episode of IMPAKT TV. Thank you so much for joining me. I think we still have a lot to think about, and I wish you a great stay at the rest of the festival.
Thank you very much. Thank you.